It's a pleasure to be here again after 2 very long years, and thanks to all the people from the university for the invitation, for this warm invitation. I'm really glad to be here. We'll be discussing a topic that has been long placed on delay. We've been speaking about the role of teachers in the classroom, but perhaps we haven't seen lately the actual impact of teaching in people's lives. So, okay, thank you. So, let's begin to talk about the actual role of teachers in the actual process of learning, and let's wonder why teaching is so powerful, and why is it that leadership has any impact in people's lives. So what is it that we're going to be discussing today? The first thing is understanding the actual and the true concept of leadership, for one thing. Then we'll be looking at leadership in education. What does it mean? What does it look like? What elements can we discuss, and what elements are actually involved in the role of teachers and education? And there are actually 4 important matters to be discussed. So, before beginning, before talking about the actual concept of leadership, let me ask you a question, and I would like you to address this personally. What is leadership? What does that mean to you, for teachers? So I would like you to please use the chat to write down your concepts. What is it? What is it that we have been told about leadership? So I'm waiting for your participation. Can we take a look at the chat? Is it active? Guide others, thank you. Bring in the best of our students, good. What else? What else can you talk about? What else can you say is leadership? Thank you. There are many concepts that we can relate to leadership, but there is one true concept behind all this. And this is a concept that I share and that I concord 100% with John Maxwell. And he says, as it is placed on the slide, on the chat, influence. That is exactly the role of, could you please move the chat? Thank you. Leadership is influencing others. And as John Maxwell says, everything rises and falls because of leadership. But it's not just to understand the influence that we provoke, that we bring into people. It begins with a single question. And this question goes out to you. It's, why are you here? What is your actual purpose? And I wanted to reflect on this question because without purpose, without an actual objective, it's very difficult to lead. There are many things that we can say about leadership and leaders, but the first thing that we need to understand about this concept, about influencing others, is why are we here? What is your purpose as teachers? And that's something that I would love for you to reflect on and to participate. So think about it as teachers. Why are you here? So can we use a chat. We can use a chat. What's your purpose? To teach how to learn. Nice. Okay. This is the one thing that we need to have very clear. Before we actually talk about teaching, before we talk about leading, because there are many roles of the teacher, and I think leading is one of the most important. Why are you here? This is the purpose. This is why. This is the reason we're doing things. So if you really want to say, for example, to improve, to reflect upon my own teaching skills, and many other things that you can relate to leading. I think the most important understanding of this is to be clear on the purpose for you to do what you're doing. What is it that brings you here? So once you have reflected on this, it's necessary for teachers to understand what connects leadership and education. And it's not just, I wouldn't say it's just the usual things, the plan, the execution, the curriculum, the techniques, the strategies that you learn. It goes beyond. It's having a clear path. It's having a clear purpose. What is it that you want your learners to gain? And once you have this idea clear in your brain, in your mind, in your lives, then as teachers, you will be able to succeed. But without a clear path, without a purpose, without an objective, it's difficult. We normally are run over by the hustle of the day by day, by the things that we do every day. Just teaching, the content, the strategies, the groups, so on and so forth. But we don't actually take the time to sit down and reflect upon what we want to leave as a legacy for our students. And this is the primary element or the primary force that should drive us to do what we do every single day. This is something that I learned very recently, because I thought I was clear on what I wanted to do. It happened that I wasn't. I had to reflect on what I wanted to leave as my legacy, as a teacher, as a consultant, as a coach. And then things began to change because my path cleared up. Now I know what I want to do. Now I know what I want to leave behind. So think about you as leaders, because you're leading people. You're not only teaching, you're not only providing strategies, providing tools for people to learn. You're transforming lives. You're touching the lives of people through teaching. And this is, I think, one of the most beautiful things we can do as human beings. Helping people transform their lives. Helping people make their lives better through learning. And this is something that is going to stay with them for the rest of their days. So my message about leadership and education is leadership begins with oneself. Being clear on your purpose, being clear on what you want to do, being clear on your legacy, and then using this to transform your students' lives. And this is, I think, one of the most powerful things that we can do as teachers. So, what are the 4 elements that I consider are the most important things that we can do in leading every single day? The first one is something that we've heard for many years, and listening. Listening, but not the actual listening for a gist or listening strategies, although there are strategies that we can use for listening. It's making a true connection with your students. How can we connect completely with our students? Listening is the key to the true connection. How does it start? In coaching, we see 3 levels of listening. The first one is the words, is what we obtain out of the words. It's, I think, the most basic thing, and it's, unfortunately, the one that we mostly use. But words don't tell the whole story. Words are sometimes deceiving. Words are not expressive 100%. So what do we need to add to the words? We need to add body language. And this is something that we all know. We can tell from looks, we can tell from movements, we can tell from the inflection of the voice, we can tell by so many signs. And if we combine the listening of the words and the listening of the body, then we can make a better idea of what people want to say. But there is one more thing, and this is very important for teachers, and this is something that we teachers do very well, and it's the 3rd level. The 3rd level is the intuition. It's something that is that hidden message that not even the words or the body language tells you. And this, in time, is something that teachers gain through experience. Is that message that we guess from what people want to say or don't want to say, or hiding in their words and their body language. And let me tell you a story, a personal story. Listening is one of the most powerful things when applied correctly. I had a great experience when I was teaching back in the year 2009. I was a coordinator in a private school, and that day I was in the language lab. One student approached, he slammed the door, and the first thing that came to my mind was, okay, I have to come and bring this kid and have a conversation. What happened? So I went downstairs, I followed the student, and I found him sitting down on a bench right across the auditorium. He was alone. I called him. His name was Miguel Celis. And I said, Miguel, what happened? Obviously, his first response is very aggressive. But I looked at him, and there was something his eyes was telling me, and his words were telling different things. I immediately picked it up, that intuition, and I sat down, are you okay? So we had this conversation. The kid opened up, he felt safe, he opened up, and he started telling me this huge amount of problems he was going through. His rage was simply because there was a huge divorce going on between his parents. He was taking care of his little brother all by himself. He was not doing okay at school. There were many issues, and plus he was a teenager. So it took me 5 minutes to pay attention to him. It took me just that intuition to try to find out and go beyond the words and go beyond the body language that was expressed at that moment to understand the actual situation of this student. That moment was a life-changing moment because we could sit down with the psychologists and the other teachers and make a plan to help him out. He got back on his feet. He ended up passing all his courses, and he continued his path on the school. He was about to be expelled of the school because of his misbehaviors. So it took just 4 minutes and just a little bit of attention, and not to be misled by words and actions, but to go and use my intuition to make a difference in that student. So listening has to do with the connection. And this is truly important in the classroom. And remember, why am I saying this? Because we teachers are transforming lives through teaching, through giving content, through giving students real strategies and real things to apply in their lives. So it's not just to learn a language. It goes beyond. How can we improve our listening in the classroom? Well, first thing is we have to stop the voices in the back when our students approach and start talking to us. We have to really connect in the sense of, okay, I'm going to open up to you, I'm going to listen to you. That's the first thing we need to do. We can also paraphrase, we can summarize. We know these strategies as teachers, so why don't we use them in our daily classes? So listening is very powerful. What else is important? What other element of leadership is important? The actual communication. What do we see in communication? What are the elements of communication? There are three main things in communication, in real communication. But be careful. This is how people perceive. This is how people look at us. This is how people understand. It's not just our message. It's how we express our message. What do we need to take into consideration when we communicate, when we talk, when we try to send a message out there? The first thing is thinking. What is it? Why thinking? Is what we know. Is how people actually connect with us on an intellectual level. So our thoughts based in our teaching is based on what we know. Do we know well what we have to teach? Do we improve our knowledge in teaching? Do we keep the same strategies? Do we change our strategies? It's important to understand that our thoughts or the way we think is the way we express, and how our students perceive us intellectually speaking. So it's important always to stay up to date in the trends, in the tendency, in the new methods, in the new ideas of teaching, in the new approaches. We are here to transform lives, so we cannot take for granted that what we do every day is enough. We have to look beyond, we have to prepare, we have to improve ourselves. If we don't do that, then our examples are not going to be the best. What is the other element of communication? Our actions. How do we behave in front of our students? Are we a good example? Are we always trying to push ourselves to do the best? Do we settle for the things that we do? Are we good leaders? Are we good followers? The way that we reflect our actions demonstrate who we are, regardless of the intentions, regardless of what you want to do. What you actually do is what people see, is what people take, is how you're going to be remembered. So your actions create an impact on your students. So this is something that has to do with, I'm going to move a little bit forward, and this is also something that has to do with your values. Are your values clear in your classroom? Do you have a set of values that you live for, that you live with? Are those standards shared with your students? Do your students know what your values are? So these are questions that I'm bringing out here for you to reflect upon. Because it's not just to stand up and do what you do best, which is teaching, and I'm sure you do your best, and I'm sure you're great teachers, but it's just to take a moment of reflection and say, okay, is my teaching aligned with my values? Remember, you are transforming lives. You're not just teaching. The last element, and I think one of perhaps the most overlooked element of communication, is the emotion. Even though emotions are very powerful and emotions rule our lives from the moment we're born, because the first thing we do when we're born is cry, and that's an emotion that reflects something in that specific moment. So after the moment and throughout our entire lives, we are ruled by emotions. Emotions are a great deal of a part of our lives. Therefore, we have to pay attention to this. Our emotions reflect how people see in us and how we send our messages. Are you passionate in teaching? Is your teaching dull? Are you bored? Are you tired? Are you excited to be where you are at? So think about that, reflect upon that, because that's the way your students are going to perceive you as teacher. And that's a message they're going to receive. My teacher is tired. My teacher doesn't really care very much for the things he does. So we need to really pay attention on our emotions. Even one of the most difficult things to do is obviously being emotionally intelligent, creating awareness on how you feel at the moment. And perhaps you woke up one day, you've got problems at home, you've got issues, you've got certain situations that bring you down, and you don't see it, but when you get to your classroom, or when you connect with your students online, they perceive that you're not 100%. So let's pay attention to our emotions, because the combination of these three elements, action, what you do and how people see what you do, your thoughts, what you know as teachers and how you reflect your knowledge as teachers, and your emotions, how people perceive how you are and how you feel, make a complete, let's say, a whole of the communication. This, it's something that we need to bring awareness on when we are in front of a classroom. So it's absolutely necessary for you to pay attention to this entire cycle of communication. Can you please open the chat there? I would like to read the comments on the chat. Let's see.
Mr. Avilan, maybe you can help us with this question.
Yes, please.
Where can 21st century teachers find the motivation and passion to lead students?
Great question. That's a beautiful question. Where do we find passion? We find passion in the things that we like doing. I think that, and what are you good at? Ask yourself this question. What are you good at? Find that thing you're good at, and not necessarily, I'm not talking about ethics, I'm thinking about the things that you can do, the gifts that you have provided, that you have been provided with. Are you good at speaking? Are you good at listening? Are you good at interacting with people? Think about where you're good at and start working from there. Once you find that spot, once you find that good thing you're best at, then things begin to change. I personally found out Another story. I told my father when I was 17 years old, or 16, I can't remember, that I wanted to teach. I don't know why, but I wanted to teach English. I had the opportunity to live abroad, to learn English. I fell in love with English at a very young age. And I told my dad, I want to teach English. And I found out that I was good at teaching. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. Of course, things change through time. Your purpose, the way you see things change throughout time once you start gaining experience. But when you find out that you really like something and you enjoy doing that something, there's where your passion blooms. And it's a never-ending source of feeling good with the things that you do. So find out what you're good at, exploit it, and then the passion is going to bloom.
We have another question. Now that you told us that beautiful story about Miguel and how important it is to make connections, how hard is it to create connections with teens, with students in this moment? And what should be the strategy, techniques that we should use to connect? Because some teachers say, it is hard to connect with students. I tried, but I can't. What can you tell us?
Not everything we want to do is achievable, for one thing. I understand. This is a challenge, and this is a challenge that we didn't expect, this kind of challenge. What can we do to connect with people? I think the first thing we need to do is to be present. What does that mean? We sit down in front of a computer, behind a computer, in front of a screen, and then we just jump right in the things that we need to do, meaning teaching. Why don't you take 2 minutes to ask about your students' lives, what they're doing. Try to find out who they are. Try to find out what they need. Try to find out what they want to do. Try to find out the things they enjoy doing through the screen and the things they dislike. I know it's a challenge, but one of the things that I try to do every time I sit down and have this kind of sessions is to please start your cameras. Let me see your faces. It's really challenging to be talking to a computer. We're not used to it. But I think, okay, if I'm going to be doing this from distance, I need at least to see people's face and be there. Stop thinking on the things that you need to do, the things you need to complete, what you have to do afterwards, what you didn't do before the class. Be there. Be 100% with your students and pay attention. Pay attention to those little cues, their voices, if the cameras are on, if they're leaning forward, if they're laid back. These little things that make a difference, and once you capture that, take the moment, ask a question, say something that can make them feel you're here. Let's not just sit down, turn the camera on, start the computer, and start teaching. Are there more questions?
Yes.
Please.
There is one more question. Now that you explained that in distance learning is very important to create the connection by turning on the cameras, but how can teachers also use technology in the classroom to connect with the students?
There are thousands of tools, digital tools that are very fun, that are easy to use, and that make people work during this online session. So my advice for teachers at this point is not just to deliver the content in the same way, not just a platform, not just the regular exercises and the regular interaction, but please take the time to find out about these amazing tools, and we can name 1,000 here, Plickers, Kahoot, and you name it, and use them. Integrate these things in a way that you can deliver your content based on the use of these beautiful digital tools. They are very interactive.
Thank you very much, Lorna. Great advice. Be present. That can be applied to all aspects in our lives. Jorge Bogantes, in order to get in touch with students, to connect, it's very important to connect. Reina, Daniela, I really like what you're saying. I love to connect with them. And Jorge Bogantes, that's very important for adults and students too.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for your participation. This is very interesting, having these kind of thoughts and be willing to participate, even if it's online. It's amazing. The other element that I wanted to bring onto the discussion today is one of the things that we know it's there. It's like, allow me if the joke fits in, but it's like God. We believe in God. We know He's somewhere, but we don't actually see Him. So it's like the analogy goes to values. Values is something that we, most of the time, take for granted. Do not take these things for granted. The same way you're thinking about your journey or where you want to take your students, I mean, your vision and your purpose, the values are one critical aspect that needs to be out there in the open, clearly stated, because the values are, and this is one beautiful concept I found out, and it's from the University of Texas at Austin. It says, values are individual beliefs that motivate people to act one way or another, and they serve the purpose of human behavior. And values are core to every single thing we do in life, especially in teaching. If you're teaching, you're transforming lives. You are an example. So do you live based on your values? Are your values clear, not only for you, teacher, for your students? This is something that I think we need to take the time to share. It's very important for your students to understand that your behavior comes from someplace. Where does that come from? It comes from your values. And let me tell you another personal story. Values are so important that it can lead you to the best of you or the worst of you. When I was 17 years old, I had to leave home. I left home very early. I didn't have much of a beautiful childhood. I had a very problematic childhood, and I left home. I left home when I was 17 years old, and I quit studying. I quit doing the things I was supposed to do as a teenager, almost an adult. And the one thing that kept me going forward after so many things that I went through was my values, the values that I was taught at home. And if it hadn't been for my values, for being clear on what was right and understanding what could be wrong, then I think I wouldn't be here. I would be in a very different place because I went out, I was on the streets. So it was very difficult, but I made it through. And I made it through because of my values. So are your values clear? Teachers, this is an important question. Are your values clear? Do your students know your values? I would love for you to take a moment now and write down a list of the 5 most important values that you hold on to every single day. Take 2 minutes and write them down, please. If you wish, you can share some on the chat. Okay. What do we have? Oh, beautiful. Thank you. solidarity, humility, beautiful. Hope, wonderful. Self-control, ooh, that's something that we need to practice every day. Empathy, nice. What other values are there for you, teachers? Which other values do you practice? There is always the recommendation of visualizing things. So I'm going to ask you now to do one thing today. Before you go to bed, I want you to take 10, 20 minutes before you go to bed, before you fall asleep. Take a piece of paper and a pen, not your cell phone, a piece of paper and a pen, and write down your purpose, your vision. Your vision is where you want to go from this moment on. What is it that you want to achieve? Your purpose is why you're here, is what you want to, how you want to transcend in life, and a list of the five most important values for you. Write that on a piece of paper and put it somewhere you can read it every day when you get up and before you go to bed. It makes you understand it. It makes you see clearly what you want to do in your life. Let me tell you something. My bathroom has, I don't know, 5, 6 pieces of paper. My wife says, okay, what are you doing? You're not using the mirror as you're supposed to. But that's a nice discussion. That's a nice argument, because I see my purpose, I see my values, I see my vision every single day, at least twice a day. That makes me feel that I'm doing something every day, and it keeps my purpose alive. So that's a simple recommendation for all of you. Do it, and I promise you, you will feel that you're going somewhere. All right, what else? What else do we have for discussion? This word, failure. When we talk about leadership, when we talk about learning, I guess failure is a word that is not discussed very often in the classroom or in the learning process. But failure, what is it? What can you on the chat tell me, what do you consider failure is? What is it? How can you identify failure? Is it good? Is it bad? What do you consider about failure? Anyone? Let's see, what is failure? Not trying. Nice. It is necessary. Of course it's necessary. Do we talk about failure in the classroom? Do we address this? Are we allowed to fail? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? It's always a good thing. Failure, it's always a good thing. Failure is the opportunity to improve. And I think that really conceptualizes failure. Failure is the opportunity that is given to us to learn, obviously, but to improve ourselves. Failure is a necessary part of life, and it's one of the most certain things that happens in life. How often do we fail? We should fail millions of times. The mistake, the problem, and the challenge is not to learn from failure, is to make the same mistake over and over. That's what the problem is. If we don't fail, we don't learn. Let me tell you another story. At the age of 14 years, I fell in love with martial arts, and I started practicing martial arts. I Did it for 27 years. I was on my prime when I was 21, 22 perhaps, and I started doing one thing, then I started Kung Fu and boxing, and then I added Jiu-Jitsu, and I did several martial arts. The thing is that I was on my prime, I was doing the best, and I thought I was the greatest, and there was nothing humble about it. And then I went to a competition, and there was this 15, 16-year-old kid, and I thought that was my opportunity to prevail and to do things my way and to shine. And I got my butt kicked immediately, and I felt so ashamed. I felt that I have failed, and it was terrible. It was terrible then to look at my sensei and look at my partners, like, okay, this kid kicked my butt, how? Then my sensei told me what happened, and it made me realize that the question was not addressed as, what did you do? But rather, how did you lose? What didn't you do? What was missing? And in that moment, I understood that this was an opportunity for me to understand what I was lacking. And I found out, obviously, the obvious answer is that there was no humility at all. I was not humble enough. And I obviously overlooked the fact that anyone can succeed, not only me. So I learned the hard way. The thing is that every time we fail, there is an opportunity for learning. What can we do to improve our learning? That on the screen. We have to fail. That's the first step. Failure is the first step. That's the necessary ingredient for learning in life. But it's not just to fail. Fail, stop, take the time to evaluate and understand what is going on, what happened, what did I do wrong, where did I go wrong. Assess the moment. Take the time for evaluating the situation. Try again and move forward. It's a simple equation. There's nothing brilliant about this. It's a simple process of reflection. Consciousness, conscious reflection is what brings success. Who hasn't failed? Everyone has failed. Everyone will fail. Tell that to Henry Ford. Tell that to Walt Disney. Walt Disney was considered a person without imagination. And he was fired from the newspaper he was working for. Colonel Sanders, the man who created the chicken, I forgot the name, Kentucky Fried Chicken. He was 65 years old when he came up with the idea of creating a restaurant out of a recipe. He visited about 1,000 banks before he received the loan to start his business when he was 65. Yeah, that's pretty bold, isn't it? So failures it's part of life. It's something that we need to understand. But the thing is, address it in the classroom. Allow your students to fail. When they fail, be there for them. Provide support. Failure is not a bad thing. Failure is a great thing. So failure is not a bad thing. Failure is the best thing that can happen to anyone who's studying. So in the end, my dear teachers, my dear students, leading, it's necessary. It's the quintessential part of what we do every single day. It's not about teaching, it's about leading. So thank you very much.